Hello and welcome to Responsible Government Contracting. This workshop is part 3 of a 3-part series introducing government contracting. Today, Mr. Andy Bennett will discuss responding to requests with winning proposals. Thank you and find us on the web at nc-rgc.com.
So welcome. My name is Andy, and I don't know if you guys have been on the previous parts to this workshop series, but we do every month 3 parts. Part 1, we really talk about the registration for how to get your company set up. We're talking about government contracting, government acquisitions. Part 2, we're talking about how to do the research and the homework. And then today, part 3, we are talking about the actual proposals. So here we go. All right. So I like to start with real life stories so you guys can really appreciate the pain, and the pain is real. So you need to pay attention to detail is going to be the lesson for today. Years ago, I was asked to come in to help a company. No names, no attribution here. And they were very frustrated with their proposal team because they had just lost a massive proposal, a massive contract. And if you've participated in part 1, part 2, I've talked about IDIQ contracts. So this is like the hunting license. This is like your company gets permission to list their product on Amazon.com, but that comes with no revenue. So you have permission to have your stuff or your products and services represented, and people can buy them, but you have not generated any cash. There's no cash in your pocket from winning that IDIQ, that indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity. So it's called a contract vehicle. So they lost this contract vehicle because they didn't pay attention to the details, the requirements of the proposal. What does that mean? Well, there was a page limit in this particular proposal that was 150 pages. That's it. Government said 150 pages, not to exceed, that's it. Well, they submitted 165 pages, and guess what? At page 150, the government stopped reading and deleted any other, they did not consider any information that was in page 151 through 165. Well, unfortunately, there was some important information in those final pages that prevented the company from winning, which was super frustrating. And they lost. And they spent probably, that was a $50 billion contract, 10-year contract. And they probably spent, $250,000, $300,000 in total on the proposal effort, hours and time, and, and missing that detail and adding 15 extra pages. So again, the lesson there is pay attention to the details. We're going to talk about them today. We're going to talk about how to respond to the proposals today. We've done the foundation of how to target the government folks. We talked about the 4 legs of the table. We went through this conversation, and just as a refresher, the finance folks are there to help you get your bills paid. The commander, the boss, the person in charge is not a CEO or president like a commercial company. They are the commander, the person in charge, the government person in charge of that office, of that organization, but they do not have signature authority. So they don't make the decisions, they give the direction. And then we talk about the end users. These are your program managers, your project managers, your subject matter experts, your technical experts. These are those people. They're the ones that are setting the parameters, talking about the specifications, the details, the requirements of the job, the things that need to be done. They're also the ones that are closest in knowledge to the work that's going to be done. If you're doing construction, or if you're doing like facilities maintenance or janitorial, your end user would be the facility manager. If you're doing IT and selling computers or servers or infrastructure equipment like that, then your end user is going to be the IT guy or IT person for that office. right? So the subject matter expert for that, project manager, program manager for that effort. And then of course the contracting officer, save the best for last, they're the ones that are making the decisions. They're the ones that are doing the procurement process, making sure there's fair competition, making sure pricing is reasonable, all of those type things. And they're the only ones that have signature authority. They can sign on the dotted line and obligate or commit the federal government. So they're the ones that are, they're the referee. They're making sure they don't know the details from the end user's perspective. That's not their job, but they're the referee to make sure everything's competed properly. Today, we're going to dig in more, and just again, as a reminder, because we talked about this in part 2, today we're going to dig in more in the RFP step down here where we start talking about solicitations, and we've already identified them. Now we're going to read through them and respond to them. And I like to do this live. So whoever, jump ball, whoever puts their company kind of information, give me enough about what you do so that I can use you as my guinea pig to research opportunities today. And we'll use that as kind of our example today. Okay, so we talked about, the pre-solicitation phase and why it's important to respond. Now, let's dig in. When you start to see these proposals and you start to identify, you've filtered and you've gone from a big pipeline down to a handful of proposals that you want to do. These are the ones that really, really scream to you that, hey, this is something that I can do it well, and I can do it, within a reasonable price. Those are identified proposals, identified opportunities, whatever you want to call them. Now you have to communicate to the government and sell them, right? That you have to make it apparent that you can do that job. Well, if you have $9 trillion to spend roughly every year, and you have thousands and thousands of purchases, some big, some really small, and you're spending taxpayer dollars, so everybody's really paying attention to how you're spending the money, stands to reason that you're gonna have process, you're gonna have reviews, you're gonna have very standard things, because hundreds of companies may be responding to one proposal. So how, as the contracting officer, do you make sure you're getting an apples to apples comparison? They set parameters and they tell you, and I'm going to show you this. They tell you how they give you direction on how they want you to respond. Typically, on the larger proposals, they're going to be structured into some categories. The government is going to say, hey, companies, I want you to tell us, government, about you and about your proposal, but I want you to do it in a certain manner. I want you to first tell me about your business. Tell me give me your elevator pitch. If you have financial capacity, you're able to finance. If it's a staffing, opportunity, you have the capacity to, make payroll, right? You have that loans or financial stability or whatever that system is. If the effort requires time cards, you have timekeeping system, those types of things, just the boilerplate story about your company. If you have any subcontractors or teammates on that effort that you're including in that proposal, then you want to include them also. And that's part of the business narrative. That's part of telling the story. Sometimes they'll ask for communications plans or project management plans or things like that. How are you going to manage from a business operations standpoint? How are you going to manage this effort that we're about to award you? That is in the current tense. We have, our company controls. We use a recruiting system XYZ. We go to LinkedIn for our recruiting. That is a current present tense language. our team consists of. That's important because we're going to talk about tenses as we go through this proposal. So the business volume also sometimes includes pricing. Sometimes you'll see the business volume separate from the pricing volume. Sometimes they include those, they combine those. It depends. These are just generic kind of, this is what I see most often. So sometimes that pricing volume, so the detail pricing volume will be in that business volume occasionally. The next volume, chapter, section, whatever they decide to call it, volume 2 is often the technical approach. This is future tense. Okay, if the business volume is present tense, we do this. This is how we operate. We have, these capacities. The technical volume is now we plan to build this building by pouring the foundation first. Then we will go vertical with scaffolding or whatever that process is. It's a future tense telling the story of how you're going to do that job. Again, this is as much art as it is science. You need to tell the story of how you're going to do the job without telling them that you're going to build a house by, nailing each individual nail and screwing each individual screw. You're talking to human beings, so you have to communicate that effort to them. And you can always, flavor in, oh, well, we've done this type of job before, and we've learned from this experience that we want to use aluminum studs versus, wood studs because, right? So that gives credibility to you as a company that you know what you're doing because you have the experience of what you've learned from the past. That said, there's a whole separate volume called past performance. And this is where you're going to use past tense. So again, business volume, present tense, we do this now. Technical volume, future tense, we plan to, our approach will be, and then past performance is what jobs like this one, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more, what jobs like this one have you done before? We did that, right? So past tense. Focusing on that technical volume and a little bit of the business volume, telling a story, painting a picture, however you want to say it. Those are terms of art, of industry, where large companies often storyboard this. You might have heard that term storyboarding when you're thinking about movies and Hollywood and how they, kind of tell that story. If you're into comic books or if you've ever seen comic books, that's kind of the thing that I'm talking about. A frame of an open field, just sticking with construction because we can kind of understand that visually. A frame of open field, and then bulldozers, and then concrete being poured, and then a bunch of carpenters, and then a roof being put on, right? So that is a storyboard so that everybody who's writing understands the timeline, understands the process, so that you can be consistent throughout your proposal on how you're referring to things and making sure that you're being, you're sending a coherent, consistent message to, weaving in your proposal. Telling the story is really where the art comes in. And this is where the narrative, nobody wants to read tax law. It's boring. Nobody wants to read the Federal Acquisition Regulation. It's boring. You want to add the human nature to this and literally tell the story of why they need to pick you to do this job. Build their confidence. You are speaking to both the contracting officer and the end user. So it's okay to use technical terminology. It's okay to use details, like in the weeds kind of details, because that gives you credibility that you know what you're talking about. You know how to do things. Another thing to take into account here is do your homework on the agency, do your homework on the office that you're, bidding for. One thing that I like to do is if you have the opportunity to go to trade shows or industry days or anything like that, oftentimes the leadership of that organization will talk, and there'll be a keynote speaker or something like that. And that'll be, the general officer if it's military, or maybe the director, whoever that person is, who's in charge of that organization. Take note of what and how they say things, because if they're, if they're talking about clothing and this agency always refers to it as a hoodie and this agency always refers to it as a sweater, mirror back to them the terminology that they're using. So you can make and these are human beings. So sales techniques work in this type of environment if you do it right. If you're using sweater and they're in that office using hoodie, you're kind of the outsider. You're not using the terms that they're accustomed to. But if you're using the terms that their boss is using, which I guarantee they're paying attention to as the subordinates, that makes them feel that connection more instantly with you, because you get them, you understand. If I'm talking to an Air Force person, right? That's my background. I was in the Air Force. And I'm talking about jobs. I'm talking about the positions, the responsibilities, whoever, the person is I'm talking to. I'm going to use AFSC, Air Force Specialty Code. But if I go talk to an Army person and I say AFSC, they're going to look at me funny. Like, I don't know what that is. That doesn't mean anything to me. Because in the Army, they call it MOS. That's the same thing. It's the same thing. But these guys who wear blue call it one thing, and these guys who wear green call it a different thing. So if I want to win the work from the guys who wear green, I'm going to use that term. I'm going to mirror back to them what they say. All right, so that's selling story. Kind of weave in, pay attention to their websites, pay attention to their how their terminology. One thing I will say is the extreme of that, be careful, because that's called parroting the sow, like, Polly want a cracker, parroting the sow. If the government, and we'll see these in a second, if the government says, I want a blue wall, and your response in their proposal is, we will build you a blue wall, you haven't added any value to that. Of course, you're going to give them a blue wall because you wouldn't be bidding otherwise, because that's a non-compliant. So you have to add to that. Our company has been building walls for 20 years. We understand the construction, nuances. We understand, different stucco formats and brick formats. For this particular project, our approach will be to use, aluminum studs with drywall, and we will select, Sherwin-Williams paint in this blue tinted color, right? So you've expanded, you've answered the question, you've answered the mail, you've addressed the thing that they're asking for, but you've done it in such a way that you're not just parroting back to them what it is that they've asked for. Does that make sense? So you're telling a story so that it's more human. It's more you're connecting to the contracting officers and the end users. Okay. So let's take a look now. Let's shift gears to past performance. When I'm working with a client, one of the things that I do with them is start a laundry list. And I'll go through all of the existing contracts or previous work, whether that's, commercial or it's government or whatever they've done before, and make a list of those things. I'll capture the contract number, purchase order number, whatever, reference number there is for that agreement, the company or agency who you did the work for, how much, is it a $10,000 job? Is it a $10 million job? How much did you get money to do that job? When was the contract awarded and when did it end? Right? That in this world is called period of performance. And then points of contact, so if there's a contracting officer or a buyer or whoever if there's a technical point of contact, any of those details, any of that information, you capture that, include. And then a short description, a narrative about what the job was. What did you do on that job? And then just start a laundry list. And every time you do a new contract, every time you win a contract, you add a new section to that Word document or whatever it is, so that you have that information now. Because now when we're bidding on a proposal, we have to have past performance. If you don't have past performance, and I'll address that, we can talk about that later, different strategies. I'm not a tax guy, so I have a CPA that does my taxes for me, right? So I know my weakness, so I outsource or I ask for help with that weakness. If you don't have past performance, maybe you need to have a subcontractor who has great past performance, or maybe you need to be the subcontractor who has capability, but you don't have any past performance yet. And you partner with a prime contractor, the one, the top name on the list, and they have the past performance. So partnering like that is very, very common in government contracting. When you're picking, fast forward, you've got that laundry list of past performances of previous contracts, current or previous, that you've done, and you're picking which ones you want to, select for this proposal. Typically, the government will say, okay, we want 3 past performances within the past 5 years of similar size and scope, or relevant past performance, right? So there's different ways that they'll ask for that same kind of thing. And what they're saying is they want to compare apples to apples. Because if you are bidding on a job that's, $1 million, and the only past performances that you have are $1,000 projects, that's a huge disparity. That's a big difference. It's not the same scale. It's not the same size. If you're bidding on a job that's janitorial services, but the past performances that you reference are all, lawn maintenance or landscaping. Okay, you have past performance, but it's not the same scope or relevant, right? So you want to pick contracts that you've done or are doing that are in that same size and scope. Recent and relevant, usually, if they don't really care if you did, something 10 years ago, they want something that's current or active or within the past, 5 years. Excuse me. I like to look at a bullseye when I'm selecting past performances. If you're in a position where you can select, from a list of past performances, that's a great position to be in. So if you're not, again, partner with folks that have the past performance, and that's a strategy to address that concern. If you are in a position to pick from that laundry list of past performances, think of it as a bullseye. If you are bidding or trying to win work for the Army Corps of Engineers Savannah District Office, okay, that's the center of the bullseye. If you have done work for the Army Corps of Engineers Savannah Regional Office before, you probably want to use that as a reference for your past performances. If you've done work for the Army Corps of Engineers Jacksonville office, okay, well, that's not center of the bullseye, but that's close, really close. maybe that's the next ring out. If you've done work for the Army Corps of Engineers headquarters, or if you've done work for the Army, we're kind of getting out. If you've done work for the Air Force, it's still military, it's not the Army, but it's, it's still on the target. If you've done work for Department of Transportation, excuse me, okay, it's not Department of Defense, but it's still government. If you've done work for the state of Florida, it's not federal government, but it's still public sector. And if maybe you've done that janitorial type work for commercial companies, but they're not government, but it's still the same scope, it's still the same work being done, that's still on the target. You want to get as close to that bullseye as you can. Again, that human connection that we were talking about before. They want to see that you speak their language. They want to see that you understand what it is that, how they're nuanced. Everybody's special. Everybody thinks that they're, and rightfully so, everybody thinks that their stuff and how they do things is the best way to do things. So they want to make sure that you can connect with them. And those who can communicate that are the ones that are they're going to win that contract. Okay. So you want to get as close to that target, that bullseye as possible. I just told you a bunch of times that they're going to tell you how they want this. They're going to tell you the relevancy. They're going to tell you the section, the volume 1, 2, and 3, business volume. Now let's see where that actually comes into play. When you are looking through the proposal documents, what the government provides to you, somewhere in that document is going to be instructions to offers and evaluation. They may use slightly different words, but 9 times out of 10, they're going to be called instructions to offers. That's going to be one section of the document, and evaluation factors, something like that. That's going to be another section. Often that's section L and section M. So section L and section M in, the document. What they're telling you is the instructions is how they want the document to look. They're going to tell you they want Times New Roman font, 12 point, Times New Roman 12-point font. They're going to be very, very specific. They're going to say, we want volume 1 to be broken down into factors A, B, and C, 5 pages for this one, 2 pages for this one, 2 pages for this one. They're going to be super specific so that they're leveling the playing field for the competition, so that everybody has to fall within this, everybody's got to fall within this, in this parameters. And then not just are they telling you how they want the proposals to look, but then they're going to give you the answers to the test. They're giving you the answers to the test, the evaluation factors. They're going to tell you, I'm going to talk about this more in a little bit. They're going to tell you how they're going to pick the winners. We are going to rate your business volume as the most important, and then the technical volume is going to be pass fail. So you either get it or you don't, or we're going to grade it and we're going to say, okay, a 5 rating, a 4 rating, a 0 rating, we're going to scale it. And the past performance is going to be, less, more important, whatever. They're going to tell you what the evaluation factors are. They're going to tell you how they're going to pick the winner. Pay attention to that. Use that to your advantage, because if they're heavily weighting the business volume, that's where you need to spend your time developing the proposal, right? That's where you need to focus your efforts in the response. This is kind of what that looks like. Now let me get a little pen going here. All right, so we talked about, this is from a section L, instructions to offers. I can just look at this and tell you, because it's telling you what the relevant past performance is, not to exceed 3 pages, and they want within the last 3 years, similar magnitude, right? The dollar values, and include work similar in nature and complexity. So that's a different way of saying size and scope. Same intent, different words, MOS, AFSC, right? They're saying the same thing. And then what they're asking for each of those references are these here. Now, if you've done, hey, Andy told me every time I got a contract award, I'm going to pop the champagne and then I'm going to go add, update my company resume. That's the kind of information that they're looking for. So if you have all of that already, you can just copy and paste it and you don't have, that saves you, that gets much, much more efficient. Okay, work plan, right? So that's that technical approach, same intent, just different words, not to exceed 2 pages. The offer shall blah, 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 narrative detailing how they're going to do things. And then they want some assumptions. And then here's one, right? So let's talk about key personnel for a second. I always look, key personnel is just something that you look for. It's just something that you look for. Of course, you should read every single word of every single proposal that you do. But realistically, you're going to quickly glance through some of it and really focus on other parts of it. Key personnel is one of those areas that you really want to focus on. Why? Because if you are doing a project that has, 10 people required to do the job, sometimes they'll tell you it's 10 people, sometimes you just need to figure that out. They may say the project manager is key personnel. Provide a letter of commitment or a letter of intent and the resume for all key personnel. So if you see key personnel, there's going to be requirements for that. And that's going to be somebody that's of the group that's doing the job. There's going to be a handful of people that the government's saying are super special. And those are the ones that they want to see the resumes of. All right, so that's all that's going on with key personnel. I'm going to talk slowly here for a second. I'm keeping an eye on the chat and I'm listening. So if you guys have questions, please hop in. This is a workshop, not intended to be a lecture. So if you have questions, please, please, please let me know. Okay, we're going to jump to pricing now. This can be a whole conversation. This can be a whole master's degree unto itself. This again is as much art and science. There's a lot of research that needs to go into this, figuring out, are there wage determination categories? Are there SCA categories? Minimum wages, Department of Labor standards, all of those type considerations. You need to know how much it costs you to do the job that you're about to do or that you're bidding on. I'm going to talk more about that in a second. But the models, how you get to those numbers, that's what the government kind of defines pretty standard on the left-hand side here, the costing model. Defense Contract Audit Agency is kind of like the IRS for this world. And they define the process, they define the, the standards by which costing happens. So if you're hiring somebody, that's how much you pay the person on their paycheck. That's your cost basis. You're going to increase that number by how much it costs you to run that project. Things that you cannot bill to the project, you're not allowed to put a line item because it's, whatever the rules are for that contract, but you still have to give that employee a computer. You still have to assign a project manager to that job, even though you can't bill directly for that job, for that project manager. So those kinds of things are overhead. So your $50 an hour becomes, $60 an hour, whatever it is. And then general administrative. You have to have an office, you have to have email accounts, you have to pay utility bills, you have to have a president of the company, maybe you have to have administrative staff, those types of things. Things that a normal company needs to operate their business, right? That's G&A. And then you're a for-profit company. The government, the government expects you to make a profit. So that's the last component there. And then the sell rate. That's how you build it up from a costing side. On the pricing side, there's lots of different approaches to this. You can go, to different competitors and see what they're charging. And then kind of see where the wind's blowing, and that's how you pick your rate. What I recommend is do both. See what numbers you get with a lot of different approaches. And if you're way apart, if you're coming up with $1,000 per hour over here and, $50 per hour over here, you need to spend some more time, with your pricing model. Let's jump to competitive range. Now, if you are bidding on a job, what the government has already done beforehand is make an estimate of what they think that job is going to cost. They have to budget. I mean, there's a process to this, guys. They've been doing it for, a couple hundred years now. So the contracting officers are going to do what's called an independent government cost estimate, an IGCE. Based on their experience, based on previous contracts, based on whatever, information that they have, they're gonna say, okay, we think this is $100,000 job. We think they're not going to tell you that information, but that contracting officer is going to have that number in his or her head, and that's going to be the baseline. Then that contracting officer is going to determine a range, plus or minus 10%, 20%, 5%, whatever that range is, the competitive range. That's the blue line here, plus or minus 10%, or whatever the contracting officer decides. When the contracting officer starts to get proposals in, again, they're not telling you what that competitive range is, but they're going to get most of the proposals because they're pretty good about this. They're pretty good at this. Most of the proposals are going to fall in the competitive range. So, if it's 100,000 and they're plus and minus, so it's, 110,000 to 90,000 or whatever that range is. Let's say it's 150 to, 50,000. Company A is bidding, 110, company B is bidding 75, and C is bidding, 120. So they're all within that reasonable range, competitive range. But company D is coming in and kind of sandbagging that, they're going, we think we can do this for 25,000. Okay. Congratulations. You're no longer being considered for the award because you've fallen outside of the competitive range. And company E is coming in and saying, well, we think this is $1 million job. The government's going to say, okay, congratulations. You're now no longer considered for this because you did not understand the requirements. You are way too high and outside of the competitive range. So it's actually OCI, official conflict of interest. You are not, and I hate to disparage construction companies, but the kind of general understanding with construction is whatever the list price is for the house is not what you're going to end up paying for the house if you're, new construction building something. Because that construction company is going to change order you to death. They're going to, oh, you don't want wood countertops, you want granite countertops. Okay, that's going to be a change order. You want actual flooring, you don't just want the concrete. Okay, well, that's a change order, right? So that change order is how they are increasing the cost and making up some of their profit. On the government side, you can't do that. That's illegal. It's official conflict of interest. You have to bid a rate, a price that you reasonably, based on the statement of work, that you can reasonably complete that job for. Now, if they change something later, that's a different thing. But you have to go in with a number that is reasonable for you, reasonable expectations based on that statement of work that you can complete that job. Don't mess around with that. That's a thing. Okay. Now, let's talk about those evaluations. Let's go into a little bit more detail about that. Remember I said in the instructions to offerers and the evaluations, there's only two ways they evaluate. One is called LPTA, lowest price technically acceptable. LPTA means that now things are going to start coming together here. Remember that the proposal is structured with a business volume, a technical volume, and past performance. If the pricing is in the business volume, that's going to be a different document. That's going to be a separate document than the technical volume. The technical volume is not going to have any pricing. Sometimes I'll even see contracting officers say, we want the technical volume sanitized of any company information. What does that mean? So you cannot put your company name, you cannot reference people, you cannot do websites, you cannot reference any company name in that technical volume. Why? Here's why. Because on an LPTA, a lowest price technically acceptable. That's the step. Step one, lowest price. Step two, technically acceptable. Step one, lowest price. The contracting officer is going to get everything. The contracting officer is going to only look at the price of all of those, proposals that they receive. They're going to throw away the ones that are outside of, they're going to throw away company D and company E outside of the competitive range. Now they're left with a stack of proposals. And that contracting officer is going to put the most expensive at the bottom and the least expensive at the top and rack and stack based only on price. Lowest price. Lowest price is on top. Now, technically acceptable. This is where that technical volume is a different document. The contracting officer is going to send the end user, the government person, the end user, the technical volume for just that lowest price proposal. The end user is going to read, it's called the Technical Evaluation Board, or the TEB. The Technical Evaluation Board is going to read that technical volume proposal and decide if that company knows what they're talking about or not. Yes, technically acceptable. No, they don't have the first clue. If it's yes, they are technically acceptable, everything else is thrown away. Congratulations, there's the award. If that proposal is deemed not technically compliant, meaning, they don't know what they're talking about, that one's thrown out, and then they come down to the next one, the second least expensive proposal. And then they read that one, they repeat that process until they find down the stack one that is technically acceptable. Congratulations, you get the award. That's how LPTA works. Switch gears. Best value. Said differently, most beneficial to the government. There are different words again for the same thing. Best value. Best value means they're going to scale, they're going to, of those volumes, they're going to say, okay, well, in this particular proposal, the pricing is less important than the technical volume. The good idea is more important than the price. How does this play out? I love using the example of Air Force One. Everybody knows Air Force One. It's the plane the president flies around in. Blue and white, big 747. You see the president getting off the plane waving to everybody. A few years ago, Air Force One needed new refrigerators. Okay, well, I can go down to Walmart and buy a refrigerator for like a college dorm, one of those, and just shove it in the airplane, right? I mean, this is like a $200 project. No. The bids were in the $20 million range. I think the final was, they ended up pulling it back, but the range was like $23 million for it. And they called them chillers, of course, because, refrigerator, so they needed to make it bespoke. Because of this, it's a super important airplane. It's an airplane. You can't just put any electronics on an airplane. They have to be compatible with you don't want to crash the plane because it was pulling 120 power and they only have 220, whatever the voltage is, right? It has to fit within the space that they had the previous, chillers in. There are two Air Force Ones, there are two planes, so you have to have multiple. So there are many, many special requirements that went into this contract that made the details more important than the price. Because yeah, we may save a couple bucks, but it's going to bring down Air Force One, and that's going to, that's kind of a big deal. Right. So the value to the government of the technical approach far outweighed the price. And that makes sense to me. Okay, so that's the other way. So best value and LPTA. Those are the only two ways that they pick. And now what does that look like? Okay, so up here, evaluation. The government will award contract resulting in solicitation, boom, boom, boom. Will be most advantageous to the government. Best value, ding, ding, ding. And then they're telling you what the priority is here. Technical and past performance, when combined, are significantly more important than price when being evaluated. They're telling you how they're giving you they're giving you the answers to the test up front. This is from an RFP. This is from a real RFP, and this is very, very common. Excuse me. Proposal evaluation. This contract will be awarded on a lowest price technically acceptable, LPTA. Boom, boom, boom. So that's the process. They don't need to explain that process because everybody knows it's what I just described to you. Basis for award. Here's a different one. The government will evaluate technical capabilities, past performance, and price. Following quotes, blah, blah, blah. Evaluation government outlined. However, contractors are strongly to encourage their best technical solution prices to request quote. So again, this is 3 different examples of, the same point, what I'm telling you here. I have not seen anybody pick up on, volunteering to be the guinea pig here. So we can take questions, we can dive into actual opportunities. You guys tell me. Otherwise, I'll use janitorial services as my kind of opportunity here, or as my focus here. Okay, so let's do that. Oh, here we go. Education. Define SEL for me if you don't mind. I don't know that term. Social emotional learning. Okay, so let's do some homework here. And if you've participated in my workshops before, in part 1 and 2 specifically, you know this website. This is sam.gov. This is free. You can go to this site now and do your login, create that credential, and find these opportunities. I'm doing my 2-factor authentication, and now I'm logged in. So we spoke about finding the opportunities last workshop in part 2. So I'm going to fast forward through that part, and I'm going to look for, let's just do a wild card here for social emotional learning. Let's see what oh, look at that. Okay. Huh. Nice. Okay, so that's going to be a sources sought. So that's not going to be one that we're looking for, and it expired in August. So let me play, and you can help me out with this, if there are other terms, other ways to say that, that would be helpful too, because this is like a Google search, guys. You need to, figure out what it is, and then think about how other people who aren't experts in that field would use to describe that, right? Because different people are going to say the same thing slightly differently. All right. So let's do social learning. Let's see if that, okay, so we get some more results that way. All right, so let's use that social learning as our starting point. I'm going to show you, let's see how much time we have. All right, so let me show you a sources sought first, and then we'll come back to an RFP. So this sources sought, let's do that one. And then we're going to go back to an actual solicitation, and let's use this one looks kind of interesting. Okay, let's use that one. All right, so sources sought first. Remember, in the timeline, the process. Okay, got it. All right, so sources sought. Remember in part, I'm going to fast forward through this because we only have a few minutes left, but remember the sources sought is one of those early stage things. A response to a sources sought is very, this is like a 2 or 3 page thing. Down at the bottom, they're going to tell you, let me zoom in a little bit so you guys can see it a little bit better. Down at the bottom, they're going to tell you this document must address the minimum of the following. What I like to do here is make the first page or the last page your capability statement. Ground the contracting officer in who you are, right? Capability statement, single page, boom, here's who we are. And then, page 2, 3, however long it takes, within the limits, take their question and then your response, excuse me. Take their question and then your response. Just go straight down. So you're answering exactly what it is that they're asking. No phone calls. Boom, boom, boom. All right. So I don't see a limit. 10 page. All right. So they're taught no more than 10 pages. And see, guys, I'm not making this stuff up. Times New Roman, 11-point font. So if you put 12, they will disqualify you. If you submit this and they tell you up front here, okay, this one's expired, but if you submit this at 11:01 Eastern time, they're not going to consider you. They don't mess around with this stuff. I've been doing this for 22 years and I submit proposals at least 24 hours in advance because I don't know if my email is going to crash. You don't mess around with this stuff. This is too big of a deal for your company to mess around with that. Okay, so that's a sources sought response. Now I'm going to go to an RFP. And boom, boom, boom. So this one's due. Okay, so this one's due in July, so you have time to develop the proposal. It's full and open. Remember from part 2, this is not a small business set aside. And then we're going to look at, okay, here's all the stuff. Now let's see, this is a broad agency announcement, so this one's going to be a little bit different, but that's okay, we can use it. Let's do the document. Here are the documents that are associated with this, and let's read through it. What did I say? First things that I go to, instructions to offers and evaluation factors. So I'm going to look through here. This is the first time I've seen this document. I just pulled it up. I'm going to look through here and see, okay, eligibility. Let's see, submission. So I need to widen my terminology. Instructions to offers, okay, submission. It's the same thing, just a different word. Submission, content and form, application, submission. So I'm going to go to page 24 and review that. Let's see. Oh, let's put it in here. Yes. Okay. So they are telling you they want, okay, they don't want use of color. Okay, so they're giving you kind of parameters. And then they're saying stage 1, they're saying the proper. Okay, so here's, section 3, white paper preparation. This is what they want. The format, this is, pretty standard margin, single space, times 0. I'm not making this up, guys. This one's 12 point. No more than 5 pages, excluding, right? So there's a little bit more direction, some stuff you need to include on the cover page, technical approach, requests for the government, key personnel. So they're telling you the sections. These are different than what I said. This is not business, technical, and past performance. This is technical approach, request for government support, and key personnel and biographical information. These are the sections that they want. They're not instructing you to do it in different files, different documents. This one can all be in one, but they're giving you the answer. They're giving you the format of how they want things to look. And then let's look for evaluation. Okay, we did submission, application, award notices, funding, other submission, intergovernmental reviews, recipient, qualifications 42. So probably in 42, they're going to talk about how they're going to pick, be qualified, right? So they're telling you what the qualifications are to be a recipient, all right? I know we're bumping up to time here, but let me see if there's another one that's not a BAA. Let's try this guy. I want to highlight the point about how the evaluation factors are described here. Okay, so totally different agency, different effort. Let me zoom in. Oh, I appreciate that. Okay. So the station number, this is kind of a cover sheet, it looks like. Place of performance, so they're giving you some details of work and they're giving you the duration. This looks like a 4-year contract. Background, plans. And if I don't see it, I'm just going to keyword search it. Let's save ourselves some time. Evaluation criteria, evaluations, planning, duties, responsibilities, scope, evaluation. Haha, see, it's going to be in there, guys. I'm telling you, it's going to be in there. So evaluation factors for selection. So they're telling you what the factors are. They're telling you that this is this one's point. Remember the scale, best value. This is a best value. I can tell that just because of the point system, right? So they're saying technical expertise is higher of interest than communications and teamwork and customer. They're telling you exactly what it is that they see as important. And if I do instructions, there we go. So they are telling you again what it is, list of required forms prior to award. So you have to have those things submitted as part of your proposal. They're giving you the information that you need.
Thank you for your time today. We hope this workshop was instructive and informative. Please find additional accredited courses and other support services on our website at nc-rgc.com.